Series I savings bonds are an attractive way to save money, especially when the stock market's getting hammered and future economic stability is uncertain. What's up guys, I'm Josh and welcome back to my channel where we cover all things personal finance. In today's video, we're going to explore why you should care about these I-bonds, what they're designed for, and how you can even use them to protect your emergency fund from inflation. If you remember back to your childhood, there's a good chance you've received paper treasury bonds as a gift. As a young child, it's not exactly what you wanted for your birthday, but 20 years later when you're broke and you're rifling through your attic, you realize it was what you needed. I'm making this video now because Series I bonds at their current rate are at least worth looking into. So the US government tries to aim for a 2% inflation rate, a nice and steady rate that allows people to plan for the future. However, 2021 brought inflation rates we haven't seen since 1982, years before I even arrived on this planet. In December of 2021, we saw inflation rise to a whopping 7%. This means if you were holding $1,000 in your checking account since December 2020, well, that money now only has the purchasing power of $930. Your money is quite literally withering away before your eyes, and a lot of people don't even realize it. Now, this is where Series I US Treasury bonds come into play. The US government offers these Series I bonds as a way for people to save money while protecting that money against rising inflation. It's a low-risk investment that's guaranteed to pay out more money than you originally put in. The interest rate the federal government pays you for holding these bonds, also known as the composite rate, is a combination of two parts. First, we have a fixed rate of return, which remains the same throughout the entire life of the bond. And second, we have a variable rate, which is calculated twice a year based on inflation adjustments from the prior 6 months. Now, the current rate for Series I bonds at the time of recording this video is 7.12%. So the fixed rate portion of the 7.12% is actually 0% right now, meaning the entire 7.12% comes from the variable inflation rate. And before we go any further, in order to be eligible to purchase Series I bonds, you must meet certain criteria. You must have a social security number and either be a US citizen, a US resident, or a civilian employee of the United States. So if you decided to dip your toe into the world of single stock investing in 2021, there's a decent chance your investments are currently down a lot. For instance, Peloton stock was absolutely crushing in late 2020. So what the hell? You throw $10K into it last January at $160 per share. You held the stock the entire year, where it's now worth $35 per share, effectively turning that $10K investment into $2,200. So when markets are getting pummeled like they currently are, investors, they tend to transition their money over to bonds as they're safer and they have a guaranteed return. So let's talk about the benefits of buying these Series I bonds. Why should you even bother? Well, like we just talked about, the current 7.12% interest rate, it's hard to ignore. Another benefit is the growth on these bonds is not taxable at the state and local level. This can be a substantial benefit if you live in a high-income state like California. And while these Series I bonds are taxed at the federal level, you don't pay the tax on the interest until you cash out the bond. The bond's interest is added monthly but compounded semi-annually, where it's then added to the principal. In other words, you'll be able to earn interest on the interest that's added to your bond semi-annually. However, you can report the interest every year if you think this would be ideal for your particular tax situation. Also, if you're using money from the Series I bonds to pay for higher education for yourself, your spouse, or your dependents, you may be able to avoid paying federal income tax on the interest that they've earned. Another benefit of Series I bonds is they're backed by the federal government, which is not backed by anything. Okay, so if the federal government gets to the point where they can't pay out for bonds, then we're probably having some more substantial issues.
So, what are some of the downsides of purchasing these bonds?
Well, when we think of bonds, we may think they're the type of investment that we just purchase and forget about. But that's not the case for Series I bonds. That's because when the stock market's skyrocketing, bonds will typically be paying out less. This is because when bond yields are very low, investors will be looking to the stock market to make a better return on their money. And right now, bond yields are through the roof, which is likely correlated to some extent to the market sell-off we've been experiencing late 2021, early 2022. A guaranteed 7.12% return is really hard to pass up. However, these bond yields change every 6 months, so we need to continually analyze whether we should continue to hold our bonds or transition that money to the market. This is also highly dependent on our particular investment risk profile. So the opportunity cost of having your money tied up in bonds when the market is pumping is something we need to consider. Another con to these Series I bonds is that we're only permitted to purchase $10,000 per year. However, we are allowed to purchase an additional $5,000 worth of paper Series I bonds per year, but these additional bonds must be purchased with our tax refund. Important note, this is per tax return and not per person. And this also means we would have had to overpay our taxes the prior year, which essentially means we would have had to give the government an interest-free $5,000 loan.
Ooh, gross.
If you're self-employed, you can likely pay extra quarterly taxes in the fourth quarter, but if you're an employee, you can use IRS Direct Pay to make a one-time payment in order to overpay your taxes. However, check with the CPA before deciding to do so, as I'm just a random guy on the internet. There's also a minimum holding period of 1 year before you're able to cash out your Series I bonds. And if you cash your bonds before the 5-year mark, you'll simply lose out on the prior 3 months' interest. So if you want to cash out $10,000 worth of bonds after the 1 year mark, but before the 5-year mark, you'll simply lose out on $178 of interest if your interest rate was 7.12% the 3 months before you sell. So how do we purchase Series I bonds? Well, Series I bonds are considered non-marketable securities, which simply means they cannot be traded on secondary market exchanges. Today, you must purchase I bonds in electronic form on treasurydirect.gov. Now, this website looks like it hasn't been updated since 2005, but I assure you it's legit. So in order to purchase bonds, you'll need to create an account on this website, which you'll need your social security or tax ID number, driver's license or state ID number, and your bank's routing and account numbers. Once you're all set up, you can purchase bonds in any amount between $25 and $10,000 down to the penny. You can even set up recurring purchases or purchase directly through direct deposits through your employer. In order to determine the current value of your electronic I bonds, you can log into your Treasury Direct account where you'll be able to see exactly what they're currently worth. So you can also purchase an additional $5,000 worth of Series I bonds through your tax return, assuming you have at least a $5,000 refund, like we talked about earlier in the video. To do this, you'll simply need to include the IRS Form 8888 with your tax return and complete Part 2 in order to tell the IRS that you want to use all or part of your tax refund to purchase paper I bonds. And to check the value of your paper bonds, treasurydirect.gov has a simple calculator you can use. For electronic I bonds, you'll cash them out right on treasurydirect.gov. So the minimum you can cash out is $25, but you must then have at least $25 left in your electronic I bond. The cash will hit your checking or savings account within 2 days. For paper bonds, your best bet is to find a local brick and mortar bank that'll cash them for you. The other option here is to send them to Treasury Retail Security Services along with FS Form 1522. You can find more information about this on treasurydirect.gov. Now, emergency funds are typically held in an account such as a high-yield savings account. The problem with these types of accounts is they're currently only earning in the ballpark of 0.5% to 2%. With current inflation of 7%, this means they're actually losing value as time goes on. But here, you're trading the loss in value for the safety and accessibility that savings accounts offer. However, there is a strategy in which you can retain that safety and accessibility, yet have your money keep up with inflation. This strategy will take some time to fully incorporate, but once it's in place, you're golden. So let's say, in order to fully fund our 6-month emergency fund, we would need $30,000, which equates to about $5,000 per month in expenses. So now, we currently have $30,000 in our high-yield savings account, but we would really prefer it be in Series I bonds so that inflation doesn't decimate our cash. In this case, we would purchase these bonds at the rate in which we have excess money to do so. We could either keep our $30,000 in our bank and slowly purchase new bonds with our income, or we can take a slight risk and slowly purchase bonds with a portion of our emergency fund. This, of course, will depend on your particular risk tolerance and what you feel comfortable having tied up for a 12-month period. If we were to purchase $5,000 in bonds every 6 months, this strategy would take 3 years to fully convert our emergency fund from our high-yield savings account over to Series I bonds. Of course, like anything, we don't have to be 100% one way or the other. We could hold half in bonds and half in our savings account. Really, whatever you're comfortable with. The important thing to remember here is bonds must be held for 12 months before you're able to cash them. And if you do need to cash them before the 5-year mark, you'll lose out on the prior 3 months worth of interest. If you found value in this video, please consider clicking the like button and subscribing for future personal finance videos. If you'd like to see why I think Yotta Savings is one of the best savings accounts around, click up here. Also, let me know down below, what kind of content would you like to see on this channel? Thanks for watching. Peace.